Following Liu Bang's rule, many of the Chinese Han emperors began to focus on expanding the territory of the Han Dynasty. One of those is Wudi. The name Wudi means the martial or the warlike emperor, and although he had many accomplishments, probably his best known is his military conquests. Now, in particular, the Han Dynasty had a problem with these people to the north called the Xiongnu. The Xiongnu were a semi-nomadic people, and they lived out in mostly what was desert. Under Liu Bang, the Xiongnu had continued to raid China and attack villages and steal things of value to them. And Liu Bang's answer was to basically cut a deal with them. Chinese princesses and treasure would be sent annually to the Xiongnu, and the Xiongnu in turn would just promise not to attack, although usually they attacked anyway. Eventually, under Wudi, this was seen as no longer acceptable. So Wudi made an alliance with some of the Xiongnu's neighbors, who were rivals, and over the course of a series of wars called the Xiongnu War, the Han Dynasty seized control of Xiongnu territory and drove out the Xiongnu further out into the desert so that they leave the Han Dynasty alone. After Wudi, you had a continued expansion of China into different territories, including further east into Korea and further west into some of the desert provinces here. And as a way to solidify their rule, the Han Dynasty used a method of control we call cultural assimilation. Assimilation is when one group of people adopt another group of people's culture. And in the case of the Han Dynasty, this was mostly sort of a forced, systematic way for China to spread its culture across its conquered territories. Essentially, when a territory was conquered, the soldiers, who were mostly men, were sent out to marry into native families. And when they did that, they settled down and built Chinese-style cities and Confucian temples and brought with them their clothing, their language, their way of life. And over the course of a couple generations, you saw some of the conquered people who had their own culture really become Han Chinese. They adopted really the Han way of life. And this is really an effective way for empires to expand their control because the conquered people eventually don't think of themselves as conquered people, but they identify with the empire that conquered them. You saw this with Rome, where conquered territories under the Roman Empire could eventually gain citizenship. But you also saw it with the Han Chinese, in that as they expanded, more and more people began to adopt the Han way of life. And that really follows all the way through to today. In modern China, there are over 100 recognized distinct ethnic groups, but 97% of people identify themselves as ethnically Han. And a lot of this goes back to this cultural assimilation policy practiced during the Han Dynasty.